Welcome to the Rant for round 19. I'm the Blue Boy. Well, it's getting very interesting in the top 8. Once you get past the fact that Collingwood and Geelong have got spots 1 and 2, Hawthorn, Carlton and West Coast battling it out for spots 3 to 5. Could be a couple of results this weekend that could move that one way or the other. Spots 6, 7 and 8 are still wide open, and several clubs have their own destiny well and truly in their own hands. Sydney has been inconsistent this year, and the SCG Fortress has been smashed, but they still cling on the 6th spot. Freo showed plenty of pluck in the Derby last week and sit in 7th. St Kilda are really starting to get it together, and they pinched 8th spot last week with their win. Essendon are in 9th, and they look gone. They got smashed by the Blues last weekend, and I reckon Collingwood's going to do a similar job this weekend. The only other team that has a real chance is North, who got smashed by the Pies in round 16 and have had a couple of good wins against the Doggies and the Lions in the last 2 weeks. But they need to beat the Blues this week to have any realistic chance. My top 8 in order is the Pies, the Cats, Hawthorn, the West Coast Beagles, the Blues, Saints, Swans and Dockers. I was going to have a massive spew at Mia Freeman for her stupid comments about Cadell Evans, but I just couldn't be bothered. Needless to say, Mia Freeman should stick to what she knows, and that's mostly colours of shoe buckles on Gucci shoes. Neil Craig resigned from his post as the Adelaide Crows coach during the week. He went down with a great deal of style. Best of luck for the future, Craigie. Andrew Walker possibly took mark of the year last week, and Eddie Betts kicked a sensational goal. He looked a bit more like Bojangles than anything else. Nothing else to say on that. The last thing I want to talk about is altitude training. Runners and cyclists have been using altitude training for years, and in the last couple of years, Collingwood have made it pretty famous with their trips to Arizona. Well, the Blues are in on it now, and they're off to Doha in Qatar to the newest state-of-the-art altitude training centre for 2 weeks in their pre-season. I only hope the drug testers have got their flights booked, because no doubt Juddy will be getting tested. Anyway, on to this week's games. Friday night footy is looking like an absolute cracker. As I said earlier, the Blues have got the West Coast biting at their heels, and they really need a win. Freo are trying to hang in on the 8, and Freo. Anyway, on to this week's games. The Navy Blues and the Roos play Friday night footy, and it promises to be an absolute cracker. North Melbourne, they need to win to have any chance of making the 8, and the Blues need to win to keep the Beagles at bay. This just promises to be an absolute sensational game of footy. The Roos have had some good performers in the last few weeks. Drew Petrie has been sensational up front. Todd Goldstein has to be the most outstanding ruckman in the AFL at the moment. Some of their young kids in Zeeble and Swallow have been absolutely sensational, and their skipper Brett Harvey has just had a sensational year. The Blues have had the stumbles in the last 6 or 7 weeks. They've had a couple of big losses that they really didn't need. But in round 17, they played the Pies and they put up a great fight. And last week, they ended the Bombers' season. The Blues have been led by Juddy this year, and he's had just a fabulous year, and he's been leading the midfield in great style, along with Murphy, Gibbs, Scotland and Simpson. Carlton's midfield is absolutely elite. Last week in the Rant, I slammed Andrew Walker and Eddie Betts. Well, I'm not sure if they watched the rant, but I highly doubt it. But anyway, the results were amazing. Eddie Betts kicks 8 goals, including a Goal of the Year nomination, and Andrew Walker takes the best grab I've seen in my 40 years of watching footy. Anyway, I hope they do it again this week. It was a fabulous performance. The Roos have the wood on the Blues. I think they've won 7 of the last 8 or 8 of the last 9, I can't remember. I'm surprised to see Brock McLean back in for the Blues, and I'm surprised to see Houlihan back in for the Blues. Houlihan's playing his 200th game in navy blue, and it could very well be his last. His one performance this year, probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago, he looked slow and he looked off the pace. I think AFL footy is past him. The Blues have got Waite and Jamison and Carazzo coming back in the next few weeks, but they still need to win this game to have the double shot in the semis. I think the Blues have got too much class for their midfield, and they seem to have sorted out their forward line last week. Blues for me by 4 goals. Western Bulldogs and the Beagles, short and sharp. The West Coast Eagles have lost Josh Kennedy and Nick Natanui, 2 of their most influential players this year. They could be suffering from derby fatigue, and they've got to make the flight across the Nullarbor. The Doggies are missing Cooney. Cooney's knee is stuffed, and I doubt we're going to see him play at his Brownlow winning form again. I'm tempted to go to the Doggies here, but I just don't think they've got the class. West Coast Eagles for me. Geelong, well, everyone had written Geelong off this year. Everyone thought they were past it, but the old legs are still running, and except for a couple of hiccups, they just keep winning. They've got an amazing culture down at the Cattery. The Demons, well, they've been bloody terrible this year. Up one week, down the next. I don't see how they possibly have the skill or the class to get anywhere near the Cats. I think this could be an absolute smashing, and I think this will end the Demons season once and for all. The Gold Coast take on St Kilda up at Metricon Stadium. The Suns haven't won up at home yet, and Guy McKenna continues his rotation policy of his young guns. Carmichael Hunt comes in. I'm glad to see it. He's had a good season. The Saints are in good form. They've had a couple of good wins of late, and they look like they're going to cause some real trouble in September. I think the Saints will have too much class, even without Rewalt on his suspension. St Kilda by 10 goals. Freo and Hawthorn, this is going to be just probably the best game of the round, I would say, based on recent form. Freo really stuck it up West Coast in the last 10 minutes of the derby last week. They had a real hot crack. Hawthorn are just playing incredible football. They've had so many injuries this season. They've lost some of their best players, but they still have only lost 4 games. A lot of credit's got to go to Mitchell, Hodge and Sewell, and I really like their new young gun, Bruce. It's at Patterson Stadium, the old Subi. I'm tempted to go Freo only because we're in Perth, but I can't. Hawthorn by the smallest of margins. Collingwood and Essendon, well, we all know how good the Pies are. Essendon, well, they're just flakes. They got smashed last week by the Blues, and they could absolutely get poleaxed by the Pies this week. The Pies will be out to prove a point. The Gold Coast kept them to even Stevens last week in the second half. Collingwood would have expected to win that game by 15, maybe 20 goals. And I think they've got a point to prove this week. Pies by, 7, 8 goals. Adelaide and Port Adelaide. Well, does anyone really give a crap what happens in our South Australian footy? I don't. But just for the hell of it, Adelaide by a couple of goals. Anyway, we've got a new segment this week. Some bloke called the Clueless Cabbie has asked me to include some of his hot tips. So here we go. In the Geelong versus Melbourne game, He reckons we should take the Cats for $1.90, giving up 44.5 points. So get on the Cats for $1.90. Doggies versus the Wet Toast. Well, the clueless cabbie is saying let's take the Eagles to win by between 1 and 39. $2.35. Recommends it for excellent value. And in the other big game, Collingwood versus the Bombers. Take Essendon with 46.5 start for $1.90. I reckon the Bombers might need a bit more than that, clueless. But thanks for the tips anyway. Anyway, that's the rant for this week. Get out there, support your team, go the Blues. Oh, Chris and Rebecca, congratulations. That's the rant. See you next week.